Welcome back to another Telltale Books video. This time I'm going to start a new complete works of an author to explore all the works that I can get my hands on by Leigh Brackett. Now, Leigh Brackett is an American author, mostly science fiction, but she wrote other stuff as well. She wrote westerns and she wrote mysteries. She was a pulp writer. She was born December 7th, 1915, and died on March 18th, 1978. And I believe I have it set for this video to premiere on Leigh Brackett's birthday of December 7th. Anyway, a little bit about her. The one thing that she did that will stand out in everybody's mind is the fact that she wrote the early versions of the script for The Empire Strikes Back. The only reason she didn't complete that script is because she died in the process. And so, I forget his name that was called in to complete the scripting. But if you watch The Empire Strikes Back and you read a fair number of Leigh Brackett's stories, you'll get the sense that a lot of Brackett's style was preserved in that movie. At least for me it was. It felt very much like Brackett. And she wrote her first story she published her first story, I should say, in 1940. I have no clue when she wrote these things. She was married to another famous science fiction pulp writer, Edmund Hamilton, who died before she did. I think he died around 1976. So they had a long marriage, and it's when you get these like Leigh Brackett and Edmund Hamilton, or C.L. Moore and Henry Kuttner, you get these science fiction writers that are that get married and are together. When you're in that kind of a relationship, it's really, really hard to say how much of something is one person and the other person's writing, how much that other person influenced the one person in their writing. I do feel there is a significant difference between Edmund Hamilton and Leigh Brackett in their writing, in their themes, in their style. So I don't know how much there was looking over the shoulder going on. It's well known that C.L. Moore and Henry Kuttner, they actually collaborated on a lot of short stories and novels in the 1940s and 1950s. It's very hard to determine just how much was written by one and how much was written by the other. Some people speculate C.L. Moore wrote most of it. Personally, I think it's just impossible to determine. They're both dead. You can't ask them anymore. There is no real record, and in situations like that, it's often hard to distinguish who did what. So I don't know how much of Edmund Hamilton there is influenced in the work of Leigh Brackett. But Brackett did have her own distinct style, a very romanticized style, definitely influenced by writers like Edgar Rice Burroughs and Abraham Merritt, and one which set the romantic tone for the space opera pulps like Planet Stories during the 1940s and 1950s. Brackett did not get her start in Planet Stories. Her first stories were actually published by John Campbell in Astounding, and they're, in my mind, they're a little bit out of place in Astounding. They don't sit well next to a Robert Heinlein or an Isaac Asimov story, in my opinion. Like I say, they're a little too much like Burroughs, a little too much like Merritt, a little too artistic in the description and imagery. But that said, her very first story, Martian Quest, was published in Astounding Science Fiction in the February 1940 issue, which I could not find any affordable, decent copies to add to my collection. So, where I read the story is in this book that was published by Hafner Press some years ago, Martian Quest. It's not currently in print, difficult to get a hold of, pricey to get a hold of. Good luck. Brackett was reprinted a lot in the 1980s. And in the 1970s as well. She was reprinted by Hafner Press. What's the copyright on this? I bought this brand new in 2002. Hafner Press is still in business and publishing books. I'm currently waiting. I have on pre-order the complete John the Balladeer by Hafner Press, which is kind of running late. They had promised it last summer, and I still don't have it. I'm anxiously awaiting that because I am going through all of Manly Wade Wellman's works, and that looks like it's going to be a beautiful book. But anyway, Martian Quest was published. It's the early Brackett. It's an introduction by Michael Moorcock. It's a wonderful book. If you can get a hold of it, I would advise doing so. And Martian Quest, of course, is in that book. Now, what's the story about? A guy named Martin Drake goes to Mars. He wants to start a whole new life there because he didn't like his life on Earth, and thinks that he has this romantic notion about becoming a farmer on Mars will turn his life around. But he gets there and he finds that the farmers on Mars are really struggling to keep going. The corporation that has allowed them to claim land and buy equipment and farm the land they don't want to keep doing this, mainly because there are these giant Martian lizards that are roaming the land, and they love the vine plants that the Martian farmers are planting, and so they go into the farm fields and eat them and destroy all the farmers' crops. And so this corporation kind of wants to cut losses and get out of there. It's just not going to work. But Martin Drake is, well, there's a good-looking daughter involved of a neighboring farmer, true to 1940s pulp space opera. And she encourages Martin Drake that someone should do something about it. And Martin Drake was a chemist, and she encourages him to apply his chemistry knowledge to solving the problem of these lizards. How can they control these lizards? And of course, this being astounding science fiction, Martin Drake actually does find a scientific solution to the farmers' problems and saves the day and becomes a hero. So it's the story feels like this hybrid of Planet stories and Astounding. It has a Campbellian overall theme of science will solve your problems, and at the same time it has this romantic space opera story with giant lizards and a tough Martian frontier, almost like a Western story. It's a very good story. In my notes here, I say it's unique in its style. not totally unique, because like I say, you can find echoes of Burroughs and Merritt and people like that in here, but Brackett has her very own thing going that is identifiably Leigh Brackett. The characterization here isn't as advanced as what you would expect in novels today, but it's not bad. It's a little bit stock character. Like I say, you gotta have a beautiful girl that the hero wants to save the day for. But beyond that, the characters do have their own unique motivations and their own unique personalities. They are distinct people, and it's not bad. Not bad characterization. Uh, the writing is kind of melodramatic, but that makes it good. That's part of what makes her style a little different. Her prose is not difficult to read. It's easy to read, but this is another of those writers that, the romantic style comes out by these writers crafting their writing to achieve that effect. And Ray Bradbury, would learn a lot from Leigh Brackett, who he actually collaborated with in his early days. One of the weaknesses is what we today would call world building. The Martian environment could be more imaginative, especially at that time. I mean, we knew Mars was a red planet. We figured it was probably mostly desert, but that's as far as our knowledge went. We hadn't sent any probes to find out what Mars was really like. So authors could do whatever they wanted, and authors like Burroughs did, and Otis Adelbert Klein, they just did what they wanted with Mars and let their imaginations go. It became a total fantasy world, and I think even sticking within science fiction, Brackett could have done more of that. Stanley Weinbaum certainly did in A Martian Odyssey. So Brackett kind of held back on the imagination about the Martian world, about the technologies available in this unspecific future time, which is one of the strengths of the story. It doesn't say that. A lot of science fiction back then would say that it took place in 1990, and we'd be reading it today going, yeah, well, it never happened that way. Which does kind of pull the story down in its impact. But this story doesn't specify date that I recall. So, it still could be the future. Except there's probably no lizards on Mars. Brackett, of course, being a female writer, the woman in the story, even though she's not the main character and she's not the hero, she is a secondary character, but she's instrumental and has her own personality. She's not just this swooning female standing at the side as the monster attacks. She does have a mind of her own and voices her own opinions and pushes the hero towards being a hero. If it wasn't for her, he wouldn't have done it. To wrap it up, I would say it's a very good science fiction space opera adventure with a little more science than what a lot of the more typical space opera of this period would have. And that makes it interesting. It's interesting for the fact that it's Leigh Brackett's first story. And so that's kind of how you should approach it. If you like Burroughs, Martian Quest is probably one that should. Martian Quest and a lot of other Leigh Brackett stories should be on your list of want to read. And if you just like that old Planet Stories space opera, if you like Ray Bradbury, you'll find things in this story that you'll enjoy. It's not going to blow your socks off, but you will. I think you will enjoy it. If you like classic science fiction, I think if you like golden age science fiction, you'll still like Martian Quest. If you're not familiar with like Planet Stories, space operas, or the other golden age stories from Astounding, or of course anything by Brackett or Bradbury or Burroughs, if you're not familiar with those things, then you should probably try one of Brackett's other novels, like The Long Tomorrow or The Big Jump, before you try her early space operas. But if you are more familiar with classic science fiction, then I think this is definitely worth checking out for you if you haven't already read it. So if you have read it, please leave comments. Don't spoil anything for people, but leave comments. And this is just number one in a whole series where I try to get everything by Leigh Brackett and review it on this channel. The next story coming up will be 2 months later in 1940, also published in Astounding, The Treasure of Ptakath, or Takath, or Pakath. I'm not sure how you would pronounce that. I don't think she knew either. She just made up a name. I hope you'll join me for that coming up sometime in the near future, and join me for all the others that I'm doing. And like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I will be here with a whole lot more.